Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to today's Meet the Women of F1 session, brought to you by Formula One and FIA Girls on Track UK, who are managed by Motorsport UK. Thank you to all of you guys for helping put these amazing sessions on. And of course, a big thank you to all of you guys at home for joining us. I'm Ariana Bravo, and I will be your host for this evening's session. A little bit about me. I currently co-host the Driven by Diversity podcast, which you can find on all of the usual streaming platforms. And I'm a big Formula One fan. So as you can probably imagine, I am very excited to speak to today's guests. So why are these sessions actually happening? Well, Formula One are on a mission to improve their diversity and inclusion, and they thought that these sessions would be a brilliant way to shine the spotlight on some of the incredible women working within F1. And who better to partner up with than FIA Girls on Track UK, who have a track record of inspiring and getting the next generation into motorsport. Now, as a heads up, these sessions are being recorded. So if you join the FIA Girls on Track UK Facebook page, you can catch up on any of the other sessions that you might have missed. And you will notice that you're all muted this evening. That is just so that we can hear our guests clearly. But of course, these sessions are for your benefit and we want them to be as interactive as possible. So please switch your cameras on and use the chat function to put in any questions that you might have. There will be a Q&A session too today, and I'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Just a note, when you're sending your questions, please make sure that you send them to everyone and not direct messages, because we want everyone to feel involved. And you may as well start by dropping a little message telling us where you're joining us from, because we love to see how far we are reaching with these sessions. My last point before we kick off is that I do recommend you switch to speaker view if you haven't already. And you can do that by changing the settings in the top right corner of your Zoom window. And that is all of the housekeeping out of the way. So let's introduce our guests. Today, we are joined by Alesha Griffiths-Kidd, who is the Paid Customer Acquisition Manager sitting within the marketing department. Alesha, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining.
Hello. Thank you for joining us, Alesha. And we are joined by Zarah Al-Kudcy, who is the Head of Commercial Partnership Development within the Sponsorship Department. Zarah, how's your day going?
Good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very good. Excited to chat to you both. Thank you for giving up your time this evening to join us. Zarah, let's kick off with you. So as Head of Commercial Partnership Development, can you tell us a bit more about what your role actually entails?
So I think it's sort of, for the American sports fans, it's the quarterback of our commercial department. Mm-hmm. So there are 4 streams. We've got sponsorship, which I think everyone, would understand, traditional partnerships, digital ad sales, licensing, and then account management of our partners. Mm-hmm. And me and my team, we sit in the middle of that. So, we develop strategy and narratives and creative and responses for new partners. We help current partners get the best out of their partnerships. And now actually sort of that grouping of all those verticals is actually fairly new to us in the last couple months. Previously, digital and licensing sat separately, but now it's really a way for us to be, offer a lot of partners a more integrated approach. So, if you're a brand, we can now service you the direct sort of digital licensing and traditional partnership piece as well.
That's really interesting. It sounds like you are stuck into a wide range of bits there, and I'm looking forward to delving into that a bit more further into the conversation. Alesha, can you tell us a bit more about what you get up to as the Paid Customer Acquisition Manager?
Sure. So I sit in the marketing team, as mentioned. I tend to look after some of our core commercial products. So F1 TV, you will know if you're not based in the UK, tickets, and I also support the customer marketing team to promote esports and fantasy and just try and find new fans for those new ventures that we're pushing into. The role itself, I would say, is quite diverse. So there will be elements where we're looking at messaging, we're looking at new technology, we're looking at partners and working with the wider business.
Very interesting. And how did you actually get into this role? What were the steps you took and what was your career path up to this point?
So I'd say mine's quite an interesting one. So I started out agency side, so working at a media agency, before I sort of worked across the different channels, and I moved to Experian, so finance, completely different industry. Did some display, worked across all the different channels, headed up a small search team, and I did a year at Microsoft, and I was doing their web merchandising, so that gave me quite a lot of experience in terms of coding and doing things like that. And then I've brought that over to Formula One now, so managing all the different channels that I work across.
That's really cool. And I think that's an important point as well, to note that you haven't actually always worked within sport, but the skills you've learned from those other areas have been just as applicable within F1. Zarah, jumping to you, I know that you actually have worked in sports, but not motorsport specifically. Can you talk to us about your journey into your role now? And were you always a motorsport fan or sports in general?
I just realised I shouldn't have given a quarterback analogy previously. I should have said we were the engine of the department. That's a much better analogy, given the talk that we're on. I've always worked in sport. I started out wanting to be a journalist, and like Alesha, actually started in agency. I would advocate anyone that's starting out. Agency is such a great way to get a very quick understanding of a variety of different roles or clients. I learned a lot within sort of my 4 years at the agency side of things. And then I moved from comms into, I went to Australia actually, and I think it's Tanisha is joining us from Australia on this call. So I went to Australia to work for a governing body over there, and so did more comms and marketing, came back to the UK, did Sky Sports, and that was a pure marketing. And then I did a couple of tournament organising committee roles, so Rugby World Cup and Cricket Champions Trophy and Women's Cricket World Cup, before coming into the commercial world. So I think the way I like to think of it, apart from where I was, it's more, I started off wanting to find stories in comms. Then I moved into marketing, which is more about telling the stories. And now I kind of tell the stories and try and make money for it as well, from a commercial point of view. So quite a varied role of, whether it's rights holder, brand, agency, etc. And sort of I've kind of developed that over time, which has really helped me in my current role to understand the needs and wants from a marketing and comms point of view as well.
I see. We've actually had a question come in from Yvonne for you, and she's asked, what is the part of your job that you get the most energy from?
Oh, what a great question. Energy. I think probably just the variety of it. Like, honestly, it's just, we can be talking to, we can be trying, ideating and thinking about a response for Apple, then the next minute, maybe something to do with IT services, then maybe an FMCG brand, then insurance. So I just, I love the sort of variety of it. And actually also, as my colleague has just rightly pointed out, my colleagues as well, they sort of give me a lot of energy working with them. So she's on the call too. So I think, look, variety in brands and opportunities, but also just in the people. I think this, of all the sports I've worked in, I've never worked in a sport that has such a speed of change and innovation. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but genuinely, it seems like the culture that you sort of see from an F1 team point of view transcends into the actual culture of how everyone works as well.
Oh, I love that. So many of the conversations that we've had so far, people have said that F1 has a real family feel. And that's one of the things they love the most about it, whether it's team side or actually working within Formula One itself. So it's good to hear that you experienced that too. Alesha, what about you? What do you really love about your role?
So I would say variety is definitely a big part for the marketing side as well. So I think in the same way, it can be very creative. We could be, putting copy together, agreeing on creative concepts for the next campaign, or we can be looking at performance. We can be working with different partners. So there's a lot going on. One other thing I think is just how quickly the industry changes. So you've always got to keep abreast of what's happening, what new rules, regulations are coming in, how do we adapt? Also, what sort of new partners could we work with? And I think that's quite interesting, is finding a great new solution to come in that's going to help make my day easier. That's always a big win.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. We have lots of people that join these calls that are interested in pursuing similar career paths to the ones that you ladies are in. But what advice would you give, Zarah, we'll start with you, to people that might be interested in pursuing a career in the sponsorship field? What do you feel like are some important tips if you want to go down that route?
A great question. I think just sort of take note of why people are doing partnerships. So it's not necessarily what the partnership is, and whether that might be, if you look at our global partners, Emirates, DHL, Pirelli, Heineken, Rolex, they all have very different reasons for wanting to partner with Formula One. And also a partner like DHL that, been with us for, I think, 14, 15 years, that sort of what they want out of the partnership has also changed over time. So I think it's probably to ask the question why, whenever you see a partnership that's been announced, or even just when watching sport, kind of, if you look at just some of the partnerships within F1, why is Ineos doing something with Mercedes? And I think actually they've done a very good job of explaining why in their TV ads in the UK. So I think it's just, sort of ask and question more, because actually if you can answer the why, that's half of what the brand is looking for most of the time. I think often we used to traditionally get caught up on the hard value of assets and the hard value of a partnership. And actually now more than ever, and particularly in the last 12 months, you really have to, we're almost competing with marketing in a way for a lot of these brands. They have to justify why would they spend money on a partnership above and beyond their traditional marketing campaign. I don't know if that actually helps in sort of the why thing, but look, I think just being curious, it helps you to stand out from the crowd. And I think, sorry, one more thing to add to that is get really good at selling yourself. If you can't sell yourself, then I think automatically that sort of raises questions, and it's fine to sort of sell yourself. I think routinely, particularly women in sport, have been sort of made to feel like actually we shouldn't stand up and talk about ourselves, but actually, it's okay to. And I think that's a way to stand out amongst, other people, of just being confident and proud of stuff that you've achieved, and asking questions back as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to everyone listening. And as you said, it is more a case for women that we do often hear that ladies and other people from underrepresented groups, in fact, suffer from imposter syndrome, and we just generally seem to have a little less confidence when we're selling ourselves. But it's so important, and in an industry like Formula One, which is so competitive, you really have to believe in yourself and put your best foot forward. So I definitely would echo that, and don't be afraid of selling yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, then other people definitely aren't. So go forward and sell yourself as best you can. We actually had a question that was sent in before the session for you, Zarah, and it's from Amy. And I know that you just mentioned that some of the partners that you deal with, their wants have changed and the things that they want from a partnership change over the years. And Amy actually asked, are you expecting to see a shift in partnerships going forward, particularly after 2020, perhaps leaning more towards technology and or health brands in the future, given that most of the world has now shifted dramatically in lifestyle?
It was a great question. And I think there's sort of two parts to it. I think, yes, the brands that are more likely to spend are probably going to be the ones that had a good last year. For those that, when I say good, if you know what I mean, it is the tech brands that were able to continue to do business in the last 12 months. So I think in terms of short-term money, that's probably, where that is. But I think actually more partnerships are going to change, as I sort of said, because brands are going to really have to justify their spend now. And it's going to have to be, why would I spend $1 on a partnership rather than just buying a media buy and doing a media piece or a marketing piece of content. So, and I think equally, we'll probably start to see more brands actually wanting to see a direct return on investment from partnerships. So I think it's more the modeling of partnerships is probably going to change a fair bit, and not just the categories themselves, because at some point, travel, for example, Booking and Expedia, you can kind of see the partnerships they're already doing, because they are planning for us all, hopefully, to be back traveling by at least sort of Q3, if not Q4 this year. So I think it's more just sort of seeing, as the world starts to hopefully go back to normal, where is the opportunity with that?
Yeah, and that feeds into what you just mentioned as well about being curious and always asking questions and trying to come up with the solutions. So Amy, if you're already thinking ahead like that and trying to factor in how things are changing based on last year, then it looks like you are starting with a good foot forward. Alesha, to come back to you quickly, we had a question in from Patricia, who said that given that you both started agency side, what do you think was the most beneficial learning that you took from it? And what would you advise for someone who is also trying to make that move from agency side into F1 itself?
Oh, okay. So that was my sort of first job, going agency side. So I was an intern. So back in the day where, you just got expenses and lunch. And I think the experience was probably the best way I could have done it. So I was exposed to so many different characters, so many different expertise levels, different clients, different challenges. And I think you take that forward into your next role, and you just have to sell it in a way of how you can communicate, how you can sell, how you can propose ideas, how you can measure. And for a lot of clients, they literally love it, because it's not a skill that you can really foster at a brand side. So I would say, just show them what you've got and show them what USPs you can bring to the table.
There you go again, guys. You got to sell yourselves. You got to be putting your best foot forward. Another question that we've had that has come in is from Simra, and she has asked, what is the biggest challenge working in your role so far? Of course, we had all the challenges of 2020 with COVID, and we're still seeing the knock-on effects of that now. And Zarah, you've mentioned some of the changes that you expect to see on the partnership side. But Alesha, are there any challenges that you've come across so far, and what are you guys doing to sort of deal with those?
Yeah, so are we saying just based on COVID or just in general?
You can go general.
Okay, so I think similar to Zarah, we'd planned our 2020 season, and then we had COVID arrive pretty much at the kickoff of the Australia Grand Prix. So it meant that a lot of agreements, a lot of activity just had to be paused. There was a lot of renegotiation when we then, started back up again. In terms of challenges, I will say for a lot of advertising brands, they can actually run their activity for a week, or they'll have an always on approach. Whereas with our sort of fans and customers, they tend to only really care about some of the products I promote at the time. So it means that I don't have as great of a learning period. So I have to test things and then start and stop, which isn't really ideal for performance marketing campaigns, but that's the biggest factors I face.
And Zarah, what about you? What are some of the other challenges that you face? It doesn't have to be COVID related again. It can be anything that you're seeing shifting in your field.
I was going to go with a challenge that I suspect everyone on this call is probably facing at the moment, and it's the challenge of time. I think sort of we take for granted that if we're in an office space, I can quite quickly see if someone in my team is having a bad day. I can't see that when I'm working remotely, and so I'm having to find more time, sort of tap in and catch up with people just to sense check how people are doing. So I think, I think that sort of human connection, again, it's not exclusive to us as a team, everyone we're going through this, but I think that's something that, you can't, I think the first couple of lockdowns, we sort of all got by, and there's a bit of a novelty. I know we did some fancy dress calls and all that kind of stuff, but, we've now had new starters that have been in a team and they haven't physically met anyone yet. So I think it's how do you get the best out of people when people can't be themselves would be the challenge, I think, that we're, all trying to overcome at the moment.
Yeah, the people side of things is definitely becoming tricky now. And I think, like you said, I think everyone's feeling quite fed up. I don't know what the situation is in some of the other places that people are joining the call from, but I know that in the UK, people are feeling quite fed up with it, and it can be difficult. So it is a big challenge to try and revitalize everyone and make sure that everyone's still feeling connected. But people are finding ways, and we've done it for this long, so I'm sure that we can keep going now. One of the other questions that we have had come in, which is quite a specific question about your roles, is from Chloe, and she's asked, are your jobs more relationship driven or target driven? So Alesha, do you want to take that one first?
I'm going to say more target driven.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I have to interpret what the business targets are for the year and how we're going to deliver it through the marketing activity that we do. However, to get to that point, I wouldn't be able to do it without my relationships. So that's working with the different agencies, working with my different affiliate partners, working even within the team. Every single thing that we output requires somebody else to get us to that point. So I would say they would have to both go together.
Yeah, I mean, literally, Alesha took the words out of my mouth. We couldn't hit our targets if we didn't have the relationships. So clearly, in a commercial team, we will have targets, but there's no way any of them are being done without building relationships with prospects and using the relationships within the organisation to get the partnerships put together. Sorry, Chloe, I think we're both sat on the fence on that one.
Yeah, that's okay. They're both important things, so they have to go hand in hand, Chloe. The other thing that I was going to ask, of course, targets and success are very important in your roles, but Formula One is a great industry. I'm sure there's lots of people here who are fans of the sport. And what do you feel like so far has been one of your highlights of your career?
Um,
Go first, or Zarah, whoever has one first come to mind.
I'll jump in because I've got one straight first. Front of mind is being part of the team that helped to justify the sort of moving on of or evolving of I now can't think what they're called. I can only think of grid girls. So I think that was, and when I say evolving, I listened to so for those that listened to Jenny Gow's podcast in the UK through 5 Live, she had a debate on grid girls, and there were strong arguments on both sides, and I fully understood. But ultimately, the angle we came at it from, actually, as a commercial department, was the concept of a grid girl was initially to give partners another way to put their branding on someone on the grid effectively. And actually, we said we've gone beyond that now. The world doesn't, our brands that we work with, and interestingly, Heineken were one of the partners that were quite supportive of this, because although they target young men with beer, actually as a company, 60% of their company are female. And they equally wanted instead to be able to, which they ended up doing, they created a grid crew where they actually brought influencers and media, and they used that as an opportunity to give people first-hand sight and viewing on the grid. So I think just being able to find, because I think we live in this culture now also where we're all quite black and white, and it's like, no, we shouldn't have this or we should have it. And actually there was a broader discussion and argument as to why we should move that on, and why we should find something better for brands to be a part of. So for me personally, to be a part of that, I was very proud of helping to make that change and doing it in a way that really added value also to our partners.
That's brilliant. That's really interesting to find out that you were working on that. Actually, I can remember when that change happened, and there was quite a lot of discussion about it and people having all sorts of thoughts about it. But as you said, it doesn't necessarily need to always be black and white. There is a middle ground that can be found that can cater to the majority. Alesha, what is your highlight so far? You haven't actually been in this role for that long. I think it's been about 18 months, has it? Or just
That's
a little bit over?
Yeah.
But what has one of your highlights been? What have your highlights been so far?
I'm still waiting to go to my first race. But beyond that, I would say one of our sort of areas of opportunity that we had was actually to bring in a tech platform to help us measure our mobile activity a little bit better. And it's something that we've been pushing for quite a while, and we managed to secure a really good partner for that. So I'd say that was a really big win and quite a nice thing to see turn around.
I like that. Hopefully your race comes soon. I think we're all hoping that we'll be able to go back to the race.
Fingers crossed.
Soon. Yeah, fingers crossed. Hopefully tail end of this year we'll be able to get back to tracks, but I don't want to jinx anything. So let's wait and see. I wanted to go back to what you just mentioned, Zarah, regarding the grid girls, as that feeds quite nicely into another part of the conversation. Of course, this session is being brought to us by FIA Girls on Track, who are managed by Motorsport UK. And one of the big missions of FIA Girls on Track UK is to promote women, not just women, but women into motorsport and inspire them. And it's no secret that F1 is a largely male-dominated sport. What have your experiences been of that, given that you're both in the role? Alesha, you've started more recently, so maybe we'll start with you. Was that something that was on your mind at all or concerned you at all before you actually got into the sport, or was it not something that you even considered?
So it definitely was something I considered going in. I had no idea what to expect. I went in for the interview and you get a slight feel for what's to come, but until you're actually walking into the office, you don't really see. Now, saying that, I will say that it's probably one of the more diverse places I've seen and worked in. We, as a marketing team, are actually headed up by a female marketing director. So the team itself is very balanced. And I think we're in a really good place in terms of how it looks. And I think across the business, I would say it seems pretty even. I'm not sure if Zarah would say anything different.
I mean, no, I'd agree. I think, with room to do better. I think, it's a weird one. I've never really noticed it working in sport at all. And I don't know if that's just because I've become so used to working in male environments that actually when I'm in a predominantly female environment, I then notice it. I've been on calls in the last year with all female calls from the brand side, and there's been one guy from our side, and I've noticed it. And I thought, God, I don't normally notice that. And I think it's because it's normally the flip. So I can't even remember. What was the question?
What's your experience been as a female within Formula One, considering it is?
Yeah, like I said, I don't notice it, but but then at the same time, I do know that people, who have, I think I'm quite a outspoken person. And so, I don't shy away from sort of highlighting stuff like that if I'm in that sort of environment. But I do know that not everyone has the confidence to do that, and it's not the same for everyone. I think one of the best sort of compliments that I can take from a colleague of mine who's now left, but sort of he was saying to his wife that he's never been more interested in women's sport since being sat opposite me. And he had he's a big cricket fan, and he'd never been interested in women's cricket, but we'd sort of start talking about it, and then he's become more interested and understands actually that that there's more than just men's cricket. So I think it's getting there. But as Alesha says, it's a hugely inclusive culture. I think it's just about, and the HR team have done a brilliant job, I think, of changing the way that we now approach the market when we're looking for new talent that actually makes us more accessible. Because I think previously you had to be someone who wanted to work at F1 to find out about the roles, because you'd keep an eye on us. And actually, there's a lot of people that have really good transferable skills that may never consider Formula One as a job, who are perfect for the role, that we're now able to go and look at. And it's just the way that the tone of voice of some of our applications could be quite off-putting for some people, because they're assuming we're a very male company, and then they're put off by the language in the application. So I think the HR team have done a brilliant job of opening up that accessibility to people as well.
That's really good to know. And as you said, not everyone is outspoken on this sort of issue, and not everyone has the confidence to address it. So I think it is really important that we do have people like yourself and other ladies and people from underrepresented groups who do have that voice and are happy to use it. And I know that on the podcast that I co-host with Steph, it is all about diversity and driving diversity and giving people the voice to inspire people from other generations, younger, whatever it might be, career change. And it's really important to amplify those voices and to make people realize that there is space for them. It is a welcoming environment, and you will be supported when you get into the industry. Alesha, we've had a question come in from Kristen, and it says, what impact would you say it has had with Ellie Norman leading the department? Does that help to attract more females working into the sport?
I would say so. So I've only worked under Ellie, but I think sort of even researching the role before I came in and seeing, what's in place, what she's done and achieved, I think it does help empower you a little bit more, and you sort of get a better gist of what's in place and what to expect. And I think even just coming in, her approach with the team is pretty great. So she has quite a big remit, but she'll make an effort to speak to everybody. So I think there's a very nice feel within the team, which I do appreciate. So I think she's great. But I guess comparing it to previous experiences, I've also worked under other female marketing directors who are also awesome. So I think,
That's good to know. We've also had a question from somebody called Jasmine, who has asked, what is a good way to promote women in motorsports in a male-dominated sport? We'll start with you, Alesha, and then we'll jump to you, Zarah, as well.
So I've, I guess, previously been a fan of Formula One, but had never really understood, how you get in or how you get a role. So I got a call from a recruiter to come in. Was super excited, but I think there's definitely more to sort of open up that sport a little bit more. I think we need to do. So I think this is a great example of how we can, explain how the roles work, how the environment is, so that it doesn't seem so closed off. Because I think everyone that looks at Formula One sees it as a very much like that's what they're doing, but we don't see into it. And I think, I'm sure lots of people on the call will agree. So it's, I think that's probably one area we need to open up a little bit more. Yeah.
And Zarah, how about you?
I think it's sort of a $64 million question as well, because if there was one succinct answer, I'd like to think that we would be doing it. I think it's partly, as Alesha said, it comes down to who you can see. And one of the sort of pillars of our D&I strategy is about how we present ourselves to the world, because it's, if we're doing everything, in fact, our D&I strategy is in the workplace, on the grid. The third pillar escapes me, but the fourth one is how we present ourselves. And actually, I think as a sport, we always get judged about the grid. So there's not, it will be about when is there going to be a female driver. And we've started to look at that from a W Series point of view. Great that they're coming on board as a support race for this year and next year and hopefully longer. I think the team that have done W Series are a brilliant team, and that the drivers are great and the team behind the team are all great. So I think that sort of starts to sort of help from the grid point of view. As Alesha said, the steps that are being made to help with the workplace piece, not just in how we recruit, but also how we tell the stories. I think sessions like this, Charisma and the team have done a brilliant job of putting this on and opening up so you can see more of the roles that are available. But then kind of that's all pointless in a way if we don't also then work out how we present ourselves to the world. And by that I mean, our TV and digital products and the way that we actually tell the stories. So it's having a mix. And in our podcast, we've got female broadcasters as well as male broadcasters, and Sky Sports do a very good job. I think Natalie's brilliant, as is Rachel. And I think most of the broadcasters tend to have a bit of a mix. And I think that's actually something the US market across sports has done a very good job of for a very long time, that they have put female commentators and pitch side reporters into their lineup. So actually, if you think about how you consume sport back home, you kind of get used to hearing a female voice of authority about a sport, and it just becomes natural. And so then when you start to do more stuff around that, it doesn't feel so difficult. Yeah, and I'm sorry for the UK centric comments, because I know there's a lot of people from outside the UK on this call, but I think that's why football in this country has struggled when it started to put female presenters in, and it still struggles because it hasn't done that before. So actually it starts to sort of be counterintuitive to this stereotype of, well, what do women know about football? So I think it's about how you have the people telling the stories is just as important as who the stories are about, was my long waffle on that.
No, I think that's a really good answer, because it makes such a difference to see who's actually on the screen doing the presenting or the broadcasting, as well as the people in the car. Of course, people want to see female drivers, but it's a wider issue to address than that. It's the people in the broadcasting, it's the people behind the scenes, which is why these sessions are so brilliant, because you can see that there are people in these roles in different departments who are women or who are from underrepresented groups that you might not commonly see within F1, and that's how you start the ball rolling. Of course, it's not an overnight thing. It's going to take time for us to see actual change, and we've just got to keep at it. We've got to keep the momentum going. So fingers crossed that over the years to come, we will start to see more improvements on that front. I am seeing a lot of questions coming in terms of actual questions for tips to getting into careers like yourselves. So I am going to jump back to them. We've had a question from Wendy asking, do you have any advice on how you can stand out from others while applying for a job in F1? She has said specifically in marketing comms, but we will also want an answer on sponsorship, of course. But Alesha, do you want to start?
Yes, so I think it depends on what stage you're at. So if you're beginning of the career, I think it's very much about being very open-minded, wanting to learn. If you can show that you've got good mathematical skills, you're savvy with your English, I think that's a great starting point. If you're in career and you're junior and you want to move up to be more senior or whatever, then you need to almost be figuring out what path you're going to take. So are you going to be more digital? Are you going to be more brand? Are you going to be more creative? Are you going to be more analytical? And then you push on those skills, and you also try and bring across all of those transferable ones you've got as well. So your communication, your presentation, like your sort of generic ones. And actually for marketing, it's really underestimated, but the numerical skills are so important, and how persuasive you are. And can you work with people? Do people like working with you? Can you make things happen? Have you had any really big wins? Have you led any projects? I think they're always going to be really great. And then obviously I am very much performance. So if it is performance, it's about what channels are you great at? Have you worked across any? Are you a generalist? Are you a specialist? What can you bring forward? Have you had any really big wins? Have you taken down any competitors? So all that kind of thing, like anything that sort of is unique and it won't be on somebody else's CV, I think is really crucial to make sure you do pull out and you showcase that. And also jazz up your CV as well. Don't make it boring. Don't make it too long. And if you've got extracurricular activities, I think the person is always going to be a bit more interesting than just what they have on paper. So definitely bring that forward.
I think that's a good point about jazzing up your CV as well. I know that Steph, my co-host on the Driven by Diversity podcast, creates absolutely amazing CVs. And I think it's important to take note of how they look as well, because the presentation will keep it in people's memories. And I know that she's had really good feedback from places that she's applied to simply for how much effort and time is obvious that she put into.
Yeah, I would say it's not a requirement, but in terms of standing out, it will help you.
Exactly.
You know, we can see all black and white CVs all day, every day, but if we see something that actually shows your creativity, I think that's going to give you extra points.
Yeah, definitely. Zarah, what about you in the sponsorship side of things? What sort of things do you look for in a CV and what skills? We've had a question from Paula who's asked, what are the sort of things you look for in a CV to make people stand out?
I find this a really tough question to answer from a CV point of view, because you know they differ so much. And when when you see it, you just know, like you see, I think a little bit to what Alesha was saying, we clearly have a target, we're a target orientated team, and therefore, you know, if you've got sort of success stories and you can actually put values on partnerships you've worked on, then that clearly stands out, sort of to be able to put that into your CV. So calling out the hard facts, really good. I think also just being, I think bearing in mind at the moment, because there are a lot of CVs with jobs, you know, the easier you can make it to digest the information, the better as well. You know, I don't mean to sound harsh, but I don't have time to read a 3-page essay. If you can actually call out what the facts are and what you want me to see, then that helps me sort of deduce quite quickly who you are. You know, so I think I do genuinely find CVs a tough one, because I don't think there is one answer. And it's hard to know without knowing what the person has achieved as to what they might be missing and how they're portraying themselves. But I think when you get to interview, I think there's two things. You know, one is, and again, it will sound silly, but research the role. Like, you don't have to be an F1 fan to work at Formula One, but you'll be surprised the number of people that I've interviewed that haven't even done basic research. And yet, sort of, you know, we've had a new starter, and she had clearly digested our F1 corporate site and understood our sustainability and D&I strategy, and was able to drop that in an interview. And that's just impressive, because that just shows attention to detail. And then one tip that I was given a number of years ago for interview prep is, there are a couple of questions that you will always get asked that you can rehearse and practice. The first one will always be, tell me about yourself. And it wasn't until she sort of showed me that, and then we recorded and we did sort of this watching back and seeing that it always comes up, and you can quite quickly get down how you can talk about your role and what you did quite succinctly and land that. And then it just gets you off into a good vibe as well on the interview, because you feel confident, you've delivered what you wanted, and everything goes swimming from there. And then the other one tends to normally be, you know, sort of, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Sort of just, I think there's a couple of questions that you can prep for with interviews, which again sounds silly, but until someone actually told me that and I realized, and then you can get that rehearsed and ready.
I want to add one little bit for marketing as well with the interview side of things. So I think one thing that we love to hear as well is, what would you do differently if you did come in? What would you change? What would you add? What have you seen from your research that you think, oh, massive gap there? I think that's always quite a good little winner.
That's a good piece of advice. That shows that you're forward thinking and ready to come in with fresh ideas as well, which is always good to see. The other point that's really important, of course, is networking. And I can see a message is coming from Alessia, who's mentioned that as well. And in this industry, it is no secret how important networking is. I mean, for myself, all the connections I've made within F1 and everything that I've done is simply through networking, as opposed to professional experiences. I've not actually worked within motorsport directly yet. But what would you guys say about that aspect of things, and how much of a difference the networking can make, and reaching out to people beforehand and finding out about the roles and just keeping that conversation going? Alesha, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I believe in networking. I've actually managed to get all of my jobs outside of networking, so I'm not the best sort of sponsor for that. I definitely think it's worthwhile if you can, you know, make connections and speak to people that are either, you know, in a field that you're interested in, or research people, which is one thing I did, is looked at, you know, what sort of careers have people had, and taken down, you know, what sort of competencies do they have, what sort of skills do they have, what do I have that matches that, what potential gaps do I have, which I can then bring forward. But that would be my sort of relationship with it.
Yeah, I mean, equally, you know, I'm a massive advocate of networking. I think probably more relationships. I think when I think networking, you think sort of like industry events. And actually it's making use of those relationships. I'm probably the opposite to Alesha. All but one of my jobs has come from not just from knowing someone, but I know that I've ended up with it because I've had an advocate from someone that I've previously worked with or known, that's then been able to speak to someone that's deciding it. And I know when we're recruiting, I do sort of, if I know somewhere that someone's from somewhere that I know, I do ask how do they get on, because I think some people are very good at making CVs look quite different to how people actually sort of engage with them within an organisation. And that's both up and down. How are people that are managed by them talking about them versus how are the people that they report to talking about them, because that can sometimes be quite different as well. So I think networking is brilliant, and if nothing else, it's such a small industry, it's such a small world, the sports industry, that I think it's important to build those relationships and that network for where it might take you, but also remember that actually that can affect you if further down the line it's, oh yeah, no, I did know so and so, and they're really, that's actually how I got my first job. I was doing work experience in 2006 at the Melbourne Commonwealth Games, and I say work experience, I basically was a free sort of a pass for one of the media agencies out there, because I was traveling and said that I'd pay for my travel and accommodation. They gave me a pass, and I was a journalist for 2 weeks for this media agency. And it just so happens that someone within sort of the table I was sat at, who was at Fast Track as an account manager, saw my work ethic for 2 weeks. And so when I applied for a job at Fast Track, I had no idea that he remembered who I was. And he said, oh yeah, no, I know what she was really good. Yep, let's give her a trial. And I was there for then 4 years. So it's I think it's as much about the direct networking as in also remembering that anyone you come across at any point could be an influence in your career at a later point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a brilliant example of how your networking and relationship building has paid off. And as you said, it's not just networking in the sense of sending lots of messages and just bombarding people. It's a case of actually cultivating relationships and building relationships, not just spamming people. And that's something to always bear in mind. Even though the industry is small and that you are able to often reach out to people quite easily or find their contact details, make sure you're reaching out with purpose and respectfully and actually coming with something of substance, as opposed to just sending mindless messages, because that won't go down too well, I don't think. We've also had a question more directly about your role, Zarah, from somebody called VS, and they've said, I'm doing sponsorships in Motorsport applied project for my master's at the moment. What are the 3 most important things you consider in signing a sponsorship?
Oh, wow. So as a rights holder, I think when we are looking to sign a new partner, it'd be remiss of me not to say fee has to be part of that sort of consideration. Is the money match what the opportunity is worth? I think in this current day and age, it's also actually about added value, and sort of the brand themselves. How do they align with us at Formula One? Are they a brand that we want to be associated, and vice versa? And do they actually even strengthen us? There are some brands out there that everyone wants to be involved with, because they sort of lift up sort of the brand perception and value from a fan point of view. And then the third one would be the fan piece. In an ideal world, the ideal partner adds value to the fan experience, and activates as well, for fans. So I think they're kind of, the nirvana would be those 3.
There you have it. That's some interesting insight there. The other question that's coming from Caroline is, do you need a uni degree to work in F1? And I want to open that up more broadly as well, in terms of what qualifications or training that you guys might think are really valuable to getting into the positions you're in. Anything that you guys have done yourself that you think has been instrumental in getting to where you are now. Zarah, you can go first.
I was hoping you would give it to Alesha. Yeah, you don't need a degree to work in F1. Us as an organisation, but I think the teams are the same, and that's something again that the HR team has done a brilliant job over the last 12 months. They're devising an apprenticeship programme as well, so that we can actually find an easier pathway, and not just necessarily be straight into full-time employment. And when I was at Sky Sports, they have a brilliant grad scheme, and actually most of the grads end up in full-time work. But it's, I think that will be an added benefit to us as an organisation. But I kind of think honestly the most sort of, I always joke, I have a degree, but actually the 3 years of playing hockey did more for me at uni than necessarily the degree, because I networked, and sort of all the friends that I made for 3 years playing hockey and learning to deal with sort of the parallels of learning to deal with sports and the winning and the losing and the different age groups and all that kind of stuff. But a number of my friends ended up within the industry, and actually when I worked in the Women's Cricket World Cup, the agency that we worked with, their account director, she and I used to be on the bench together at uni, and sort of sit there and plot our futures together when we weren't playing on the pitch. So I think it comes back to actually just the building your network. I don't think it's necessarily about networking, it's just building your network, and just, like I said, never knowing where the opportunity is going to come from, and be curious.
Yeah, the professional qualifications, I think, is an interesting one, because when we're growing up, we often get in the mindset that, going to uni, getting the degree or getting certain qualifications is going to make all the difference. But then when you actually get into the professional world or start pursuing whatever avenue it is, you realize that actually it doesn't necessarily hold as much weight as you once thought. Not to say that you should, sack off any plans that you have for pursuing professional qualifications, but don't make it your be all and end all. I mean, I have an economics degree and here I am pursuing presenting. So very different avenues there. Alesha, what about you? Are there any professional qualifications or trainings or work experiences even that you feel have been really useful to getting you to where you are?
So I would say I've worked in marketing for quite a while, and the people that I've worked in, they've come from all different backgrounds in terms of their degrees. I mean, there's people that study maths, English, psychology. They have an array of backgrounds. I did actually study marketing with Spanish, and for me that was great in terms of understanding, all the business strategy and all of that side. However, I will say this world of performance, digital, they cannot teach you it in university. You learn everything on the job. There is so much that you'll be faced with in terms of challenges, and that you can't get from a book. I will say though, there are some definite training that you can do. So leadership, management, like time management, just all of these different sort of soft skills which will help you get to the next level. One thing as well is obviously the industry is probably your biggest teacher. So it's about, going to webinars, going to different events, actually seeing what other brands are doing, and just constantly learning and never feeling satisfied with your knowledge level. And that's just one way that I think you'll continue to grow and develop.
Yeah, really.
If I may flip it back to you actually, Ariana, and your podcast with Steph, I'd love to understand what the motivation was to do that, because in sort of from where I can see it, you are a presenter, and actually you've gone and created your own product to showcase your skill set. And I think that's a great example of, particularly nowadays, where we can all build websites, write blogs, have an opinion if that's what we want to do. So I'd love to know, what the motivation was behind your podcast, and actually if that was one of the considerations, that you're putting yourself out there by showcasing yourself.
Yeah, so it was. So as I said, I'm interested in the presenting side of things. And like you said, in this day and age, we all have the ability to set up a blog, set up a social media channel, YouTube channel, etc. So I had been doing my own version of race weekend coverage, filmed on my iPhone, obviously with none of the actual clips and everything, on Instagram, to help just show myself talking in front of the camera, and to give potential broadcasters or whoever might be watching an insight into my presenting skills. And then Steph and I actually met at a Dare to Be Different event. Dare to Be Different is now FIA Girls on Track UK, and Steph is interested in the marketing side, I'm interested in presenting, and we thought, what are we really passionate about within the industry, first of all, and also how can we help raise our visibility within an industry that is so competitive? And so we started the Driven by Diversity podcast. We're both really passionate about increasing diversity within motorsport, on the gender front, race front, and across the board. And so that we thought that the podcast was a really good way to get ourselves out there, get some practice that's not necessarily, in the spotlight straight away, but we can just slowly chip away at it and build our network as well. And we've met some great people through our podcast. We've spoken to so many amazing guests, so many different stories we've heard, and advice that we've got. And it's been brilliant. It's been really, really good. And I would highly recommend anyone else that is looking to pursue a career similar to presenting, or anything that you can, journalism, anything that you can sort of go out and start yourself, to just do it, just take the leap. It is a bit daunting at first. I can remember starting with literally like no followers and feeling very embarrassed and awkward about it. But once you get into it, if it's something that you're passionate about and it's something you've got your heart set on, it all falls into place anyway. So definitely go after it. Because you never know where it can lead to. As Zarah said earlier, you never know who you're talking to, you never know who's watching, and it might actually be the thing that sets you aside. So yeah, highly recommend doing that. And that's my little spiel over. We can go back to you guys now. We do have a question that's come in, which is an interesting one from Patricia, which says, what is the best advice you've ever been given in your career? So Alesha, you first. What's the best advice you've had?
Oh, okay. Trying to think now.
Sorry to put you on the spot so abruptly.
No, it's fine.
Feel free to jump in if you've got something.
No, do you have one?
No, I'm like, go to Alesha. No, I honestly, I don't. I think it's that the interview piece, as I said earlier, was really helped, and I think I just don't think there's been one piece of advice. I think over time, it's really interesting. A lot of the advice I look back that I was given at the time, I've probably taken a while to digest it and go, oh yeah, okay, that's interesting. So like when I joined Sky Sports, I didn't have a pure marketing background, and I kind of stupidly said that on the first day of the new job to my new director, like, oh, bit worried. And he said, in all honesty, I can teach you how to write a media plan and do a media buy, but I can't teach you sport. And you understand sport, and in the Sky Sports marketing team, that's quite important. So I can teach you that bit, but that's the bit that stood out for me. And similarly, when I was at the organisation in Australia, and one of the sort of exec team said to me as I was moving up in the management there, he said, look, you'll have to at some time realise that you can't be friends with everyone. And that's not, you can't be friendly with people, but you have to understand that at some point you may have to have difficult conversations. And I brushed it off and I ignored it at the time because it was quite a small organisation. But actually, as I've, that was over 10 years ago. And as I've now sort of progressed, I now know what he means. And I've sort of taken that on board as well. So no one nugget, I don't think.
Alesha, do you have anything?
I would say always try and manage up and manage your partners as well. So I think your stakeholders will always be quite crucial to, how you come across, how you get your results done. So it's just making sure you sort of keep people up to date with what you're doing. So say, for example, you need something from a team or you need sign off on something, don't ask for it at the time that you need it, ask for it before, and just sort of build those connections and build sort of your sort of sponsors, shall we say, to what you need to do and achieve, and you'll get your results.
And one thing I am going to add, and it's not career advice, and it's going to look really sus, but I work for Peloton, given the background. But it's something that I like. I'm obsessed with Peloton. It's one of the instructors there says, how you do anything is how you do everything. And like, since I've heard that, it's really stuck in my head because it's so true. And so that would be my career advice from Peloton.
It's funny that you mentioned that because Charisma had messaged me asking, are we expecting to see Peloton as an official partner for F1 then?
Well, I mean, I'd love it. But yeah.
Now, the pieces of advice that you just mentioned are interesting, and you both actually mentioned on things that can be a bit tricky. So, for instance, you can't be friends with everyone, and also upward management, which can be challenging. What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in your roles within F1, or what is a piece of advice that you kind of wish you knew before you were in the role, but you've learned since taking up this role?
I mean, I don't know about F1, but one of the most challenging things that I subsequently wish I'd handled differently was I was at an organisation briefly where my line manager was a bully, and not to me specifically. And I've been at two organisations and I did stand up to one of them, but this one in particular I didn't, and outwardly bullied junior members of staff in front of everyone, but didn't consider herself a bully. And I was sort of stuck in this situation at the time where I didn't know how to handle that. I really wanted to just sort of stand up and publicly call it out in front of people, and I didn't. And it was more of a concern of I didn't know what, and I know this sounds terrible, I didn't know how that would then affect me if I did that with her because she was a senior moving forward. And it's one of my few career regrets that I didn't actually find a way to handle that at the time, because it's just not who I am as a person. And I would handle that quite differently now.
Yeah, that's a really difficult situation to find yourself in. And like you said, you do actually end up considering how it will have a knock-on effect on you as well, which obviously you don't want to, because you want to step in, but it is something that comes into play because you never know how that person might react if they're your senior. Alesha, what about you? What's something that you've learned that you might have wished you knew before you came into the role?
I'm not sure about what I've learned, but I would say one of the challenges that I think you can face with our area is just proving the value of what you're doing. So a lot of the times, marketing spend or what you're doing will get questioned. You know, why you're doing it, what value is it bringing? So obviously, a lot of the time you can report on your performance, but there will still be a question mark. So I think it's just about, you know, proving that value and making sure that you get buy-in for what you're doing. I think that would be quite a big one for this area.
Interesting. Another good piece of advice there. Just a heads up, guys, we have 5 minutes left of the session. So get any questions that you have in now, and we'll try to quickly fire through as many of them as we can. Emily has asked, how helpful is being able to speak more than one language if you want to get a job in sponsorship or marketing? Alesha, I know you said that at uni you did marketing with Spanish. How much of a difference do you think that's made, and how helpful have you found that?
So I lived in Spain for 3 years growing up. So for me, the using it in my degree was a great way just to like make it a bit more professional. In my career, I would say it's not been that sort of stand out, but it does help. So I work globally, so it means that when we do have copy or we do have relationships with partners in other countries, we can use that. So that's quite handy. But that would.
Yeah, I mean, I joke, I'm so bad at languages, I speak English and sport. I've tried to learn other languages, but I think actually going back to the question about standing out in your CV, to Alesha's point, with F1 being a global rights holder, having additional languages would massively stand out in a sponsorship CV, because, you know, we are Spanish and Portuguese speaking countries are fairly high within the F1 world, and then with an increase to look at our expansion in China, obviously Mandarin and Cantonese is becoming an increasing requirement. So, you know, I think languages definitely are. But then AWS, who are a partner of ours, did tell me, don't worry about it. At some point down the line, there will be a device that basically allows you to AI understand how to like translate pretty quickly, that you won't need to worry. So I took comfort in that. But yeah, I think languages is a great way to stand out.
Yeah, that's good to know. I can see that Nadine in the chat is listing all the languages she knows, which is very impressive and putting me to shame as well. We have a question from Lisa, which is a really interesting one, actually. What shifts and evolution would you like to witness in the motorsport industry moving forward? Either of you can go first. I don't want to put you on the spot, so you can fight amongst yourselves.
Go on, Alesha.
I would say I think we've got a lot of changes already in place. So we've got, you know, the women in motorsport and the W Series coming. We've got more diversity within esports and even just the track as well. We've got, you know, a Japanese driver joining. So I think it's just seeing more different faces on the sport. And then, you know, when we are going out to these different countries, like making sure we obviously respect the, you know, the sort of classic races that people know and love, but also, you know, showing more of the world and doing it in a respectful way as well, I think. So yeah, I think just it'll be really interesting to see what happens next in terms of how the sport is going to look in 5 years. I have no idea. I think we're going to have more digital. We're going to have, you know, more people getting involved. And I think that's going to be great to see.
Yeah, I think two things from a racing point of view. One is, you know, I think it's whether I'd like to see or whether we will see it is actually the conversation around the hybrid engine. A lot is always made around electric, but actually there have been studies to show that hybrid is going to be the one that ends up outperforming electric, just because of the fact that it's the way it uses energy. You know, electric energy has to come from somewhere, and that's not necessarily clean. So I think, you know, the way that plays out over the next decade will be interesting. And then from a sort of, as Alesha says, a kind of a tech point of view, you know, I'd love to see us get to a really good ghost racing product, so that you can line up on a Sunday with your Xbox or PlayStation and actually line up on the grid with the drivers and race through that way. So I think that's our biggest point of difference as a sport. You can play NBA 2K, but you're never going to be LeBron James. If you're pretty good at the F1 game, you can line up on a grid and be interested in that way. And I think that's how we'll sort of get the next generation interested in Formula One.
Final question before we wrap things up, guys. Very quickly from Maria, who is your favorite team and driver? Alesha, you're up.
Okay, so I will say growing up, Fernando Alonso. So the fact that he's back is amazing. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton is, has my heart. I think he's done amazingly well. 7th-time champion. I love the fact that he's, the only sort of coloured person on the grid, and he's doing, really well, and he's bringing completely new fans to the sport. In terms of team, I really like Red Bull. I think they're really interesting, really dynamic. So they'll be my faves.
Growing up, it was Nigel Mansell because of the Tash. But I think nowadays, I actually love the young generation coming through. So there's not one in particular, but last year I loved seeing Lando, George, and Alex not racing this year. But I think I love seeing how they've all been interacting with each other. And then I'd probably agree with Alesha, Red Bull. The way they activate is brilliant. They are Red Bull. They are their brand through and through.
Thank you, guys. I agree. It's very refreshing, the younger generation that we're seeing come into the sport. That is all. We have reached 7:30. The hour has flown by. Thank you so much to everyone that's joined and to our lovely guests for chatting with us for the hour. Now, we will be sending a short survey out after this series, and we would really appreciate if you guys would fill it out. It only takes about 5 minutes, and we love the feedback, and it helps us drive other initiatives like this and series like this. We would also recommend that you follow FIA Girls on Track UK on Facebook, follow F1 Motorsport UK. The links have been posted in the chat, so you can do that. Easy access there. Charisma is posting away. So please make sure you like, follow, and engage. There's a community of like-minded people who you can chat with, get advice and tips from, and everything else. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Make sure to join in on some of the other sessions that we have coming up. And again, a massive thank you, Alesha and Zarah, for giving up your evenings to join us. And enjoy the rest of your evenings or days, wherever you might be, guys. And we'll speak again soon, hopefully.